You are listening to Singularity, Episode 11. Welcome, Miracle Makers. I am Angie, your host of Singularity, a podcast where we are not afraid to ask the questions that lead us to our truth. Each season, we'll be discussing our way through a different sacred or inspired text. Join us with Season 1 as we find our truths in A Course in Miracles, the advent or beginning of a great awakening. And just like the Course itself will tell you, this is but one version of the universal curriculum. There are many others, this one only differing in form. They all lead to God in the end. So go ahead and grab your coffee, have your pen and paper handy, and follow along in the text if you have it. Don't forget a free version is available at acourseinmiraclesnow.com. Here we go. Thank you for joining me today. In episode 11, we are going to dive right into part 3 of chapter 2, the altar of God. After poring over these paragraphs, the best I can describe the altar of God would be in this way. As God expanded himself, we became extensions of that. Because of this, there is a place formed within each of us where God and us meet. And in this place or altar is where our communication and our truth information comes from. A sacred place within our being that has been with us since the expansion, where we are directly connected to God, linked in a way that's similar to our genetic connection to our parents within our DNA. Now, this isn't something tangible. I say this because in our current state of perceiving, we tend to only give credit and validation to the things that we experience through our physical senses. However, this sacred place within us will not be detected with our physical eyes. Not even with the help of today's technology could we see it, at least not yet, because it isn't something that you'll find in an X-ray or an MRI or exploratory surgery. The Course tells us that we have become very distracted because of our reliance on our physical senses, and we are sidetracked by our obsession with the stimuli that we're receiving from the physical world, making us forget that the physical world only exists because of the nothingness that we ignore that frames and holds in place the physical world we experience. We depend almost completely on our 5 senses as our only way of perceiving. And because of this, anything that happens outside of the physical, we ignore or we just don't care about. Like watching TV, we don't know how or why it's possible to have life captured in a moving picture and then sent to the air or sent through the air and lands on our TV screen. The same with our phones. We just use them so casually without even giving it a second thought as to how it's even possible for us to be hearing and interacting with our mother's voice in that very moment while she's on another side of the country. We never really think twice about how this so-called empty space all around us is carrying all of these pictures and words all of the time. We only are concerning ourselves with the things that we can experience with our senses. If we can't hear it, see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, then it either doesn't exist or we just don't give it a thought. But when we look with our true senses or use our physical senses from a place of true love, we would know that the nothing we perceive actually contains everything that holds this world in place. An example of that is the electromagnetic field. Everything from radio waves to gamma waves are bouncing around us all of the time. We can't see them, but we know that they exist. In fact, they have a huge effect on our everyday life. So if all of this can exist outside of our physical perceptions and serve a purpose, just imagine what else exists within the nothing that our science and our minds have yet to discover. And the question I ask is, what if we could look at the altar of God or this place within us outside of the religious context and instead try to see it as a possibly undiscovered science that we've yet to tap into, a mechanism within us where we are downloading and uploading things to and from our source? I'd be curious where our minds could go if we would just let them run free of our bias. Our belief patterns are just keeping our minds distracted from seeing it as science, so it remains too crazy of a notion to be pondered in this way. So either way we look at it, spiritual or science, it's all really just another distraction or avoidance from looking at this without bias, so we can just freely explore the question and the answers that come to us. Science will tend to avoid certain questions and answers because they may feel too religious, and religion avoids them because they feel or worry that maybe it's a little sacrilegious or void of God. My challenge for myself has been to go into these questions asked and these answers received like a child. And I think that that's what Mark 10:15 is referring to when it's saying, "Truly I tell you, whosoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." I think that's saying that the only way to see the altar of God within us and experience receiving the truth from it, from our source, is to be like a child, fearless, curious, open, and with a trust in your own ability to gauge the authentic when you come across it. I think as adults, we tend to lose sight of that. The course reads, "The atonement can only be reached within you by releasing the inner light." When it's referring to our inner light, I think it's referring to our inner knowing. Just basing it on what we know so far from previous episodes, we know that light is truth. When covering chapter 1, when we were talking about escaping the darkness, we learned that we are actually really escaping the lie of separation, making darkness simply a lack of truth. Atonement, or I recently heard it referred to as at-one-ment, and I love that, it's defined as undoing the separation mentality, making everything at one. The undoing or at-one-ment is accepted by us through releasing our inner knowing, which we accomplish by turning our minds over to our truth and accepting the at-one-ment. I'm going to refer to existing in the world of truth as the world of illumination. And the world of illusion is existing within the darkness or within that lack of truth. Denial is used by us as to which direction or mindset we choose to take. Whichever mindset we choose, we determine which of these two worlds we will create and exist in. As we currently stand in this world of illusion, we know that we have been using denial backwards, or in the opposite way that it was originally intended for us to be using it. So we have been using it to cover and protect our miscreations instead of using it to keep our inner light on so that the lie that hides in the darkness can't get in. Even though the world of illusion results in a lot of pain for us, we are still more terrified of letting go of our miscreations for fear of losing our individuality. We would rather use denial backwards to allow us to protect the only reality that we've only really ever allowed ourselves to know. Even with the idea of the peace, joy, and love that we are promised to experience if we did. When we use denial in this way, we get so stuck in the fear-based world that the idea of this perfect peace, joy, and love, it just seems impossible to us and even invisible. And for us to sacrifice what has served as our only reality for something that would require us to shift completely into another way of thinking altogether, it's just too much of a leap for our minds to wrap itself around. This is why the miracle is needed. It's that push that we need to travel from the world of illusion into the world of illumination. To exist within this world of illumination, we have to train our minds to use denial in the way that it is intended. Deny the error that has been kept hidden in the darkness by releasing our inner light on it. As I'm becoming more and more aware of myself shifting, I really get this feeling of confliction when I can literally feel myself weaving from one mindset to the other. I have these days and these moments where I remember my truth and I'm walking firm in it. And then other times I find myself feeding into my physical impulses, growing my addiction into the chaos of this world of illusion. And as each of us have these moments of truth, we are experiencing ourselves accepting the atonement. The more we accept the atonement, that mindset starts to strengthen and we begin to shift. We start to see things differently. And little by little, person by person, ultimately our spiritual vision wakes up within us. And now more than ever, I feel like everyone is arriving at a place of awareness where we are realizing our truth. We are tapping into our inner light. Now, while this is fantastic, the atonement is only being reached for short intervals because what's happening is that we continue to get pulled back into this world of illusion because we are so consumed with our physical senses, and it is difficult for us to deny that the physical world couldn't be real. I mean, I'm seeing it, I'm tasting it, I'm hearing it, I'm smelling it, I'm feeling it. How could this not be real? We are so accustomed to our physical senses having all of the say in what we consider as reality, that the alternative of there being something more to experience within this nothingness all around us, or that there could be another way other than physically to perceive it, we think, well, this just can't be. So we continue to give our power to the physical instead of the truth, when the truth is that within the nothingness that we refuse to perceive lies the foundation that frames the physical world we experience. At the moment we start to realize that there has to be a better way, we begin to perceive more from a wholly sensory level, where the senses are used from a heightened awareness level of love. Perceiving in this way will awaken our spiritual sight, and as the result, the physical senses are quieted. When we are in truth, it becomes so loud that the error just keeps getting quieter, so much so that eventually the error is not even heard at all. The text is telling us that one of the first things that we can do to help us from weaving so extremely and eventually completely in and out of the atonement or at-one-ment is to begin to see our bodies as a temple that houses the real us, and to stop identifying as this body and begin to identify with the truth that is us, within us. It is wanting us to view ourselves as little temples or structures that are walking around housing an extended part of God. We are God's window into the physical world. We are distracted from our true self with our attachments to identifying as this body. And the more we place importance on it and focus on our outer beauty, fashion, or portraying a persona of who we think that we are, the further and further we get from our true self. We are perpetuating that error of individuality by covering our truth with the use of denying it. And this is because of fear. And fear is the framework that this world of illusion is built on. So fear rightfully avoids the truth because truth is the light that is placed on the darkness that fear hides in. I'm going to share a really pivotal moment that happened to me in my life with you. And it's one of the moments that I was reminded that the body is only a temple that houses the real us. And this was at my grandfather's funeral. I remember going up to his casket and seeing my grandfather just lying there looking so peaceful, as if he were just sleeping. And I had him there right in front of me. And with just a reach, I could touch his hand or kiss his cheek. But I still felt myself missing him like crazy. And I remember being really confused by this, thinking, if he's right here, why am I so sad? If I have his body present with me and I'm still sad, what am I actually missing? What is this aching inside of me for? I mean, here he is right in front of me. And as I stood at the side of his casket, I remember closing my eyes and I began to reach out for him mentally, emotionally is the best way I can describe how I was doing this. But with the thought of his love in my heart, I continued to search out for him. And then all of a sudden, I felt overcome with his presence. I could literally feel him in every cell of my being. And when I looked around the room, I saw him within everyone. It was like he just spread himself out into every memory, interaction, and love he ever had. It was beautiful. It felt like an emotional embrace. And it was him. It was more him than the body was now. And in that moment, I began to realize that the part of him I was missing, the part of him that was absent from the body that was making me ache for him, was the part of him that loved to make me laugh, the part of him that wanted to reach out for my hugs and give me hugs, not the part that did the hugging. I was craving the part that engaged with me, the part that I loved, the part of him that loved me. I realized in that moment that the body was only the temple. It was never his body. But this is only part of the understanding that the Course tells us, that once we realize these bodies that house the real us are not us, we have to then push ourselves even further, realizing that our bodies are not even an actual structure at all. So what could that possibly mean, that our bodies are not even an actual structure? Well, the real structure, the real temple, that is me, Angie, and you, and my grandfather, is the inner altar. The true foundation, frame, and structure of what we are. In other words, whatever is happening in the same space or the same invisibleness as those radio waves and other waves that we aren't seeing with our physical eyes is the same place that the real structure of us exists. So it's like these bodies are like a living, breathing version of the radio, except that instead of the body catching and putting out radio waves, it's catching and putting out spirit waves or vibrational waves, for lack of a better way to say that. But so these bodies are merely an instrument that allows the real us to experience and to be experienced in this particular plane of existence, or rather, to play on words, this particular plane. It's not the real us. It's just an echo of us. So our vibration going through the particle plane orchestrates these particles into a shape that symbolizes particly the vibration that is us. It's the invisible waves holding the particles all in place that is alive, that is real. At-one-ment is achieved when we release our inner knowing. At-one-ment is achieved when we release our inner knowing of our wholeness, our oneness with everything, but also that knowing that we are a piece of God, or spark of God. Within us, where God and us meet, is the altar of God. The definition of an altar is a place, usually in reference to a sacred place, a holy place. The text tells us that the atonement needs to take place at this inner altar, where it can undo the separation mindset and restore us to the whole mindset. Now, I have a clip here I want to share with you. It's from the movie I Heart Huckabees. I have not seen this movie, since it's probably been about 10 years ago. In this scene, Dustin Hoffman, who plays Bernard Jaffe, is trying to explain the blanket theory. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but the blanket theory to Albert, played by Jason Schwartzman. You don't have a visual, but he grabs a blanket and places his hands under it so that they are covered by the blanket and puppets his hands around in different areas as he explains. Take a listen.
Okay, let's get started.
Is this part of my investigation?
Yes. Say this blanket represents all the matter and energy in the universe, okay? You, me, everything. Nothing has been left out, all right? All the particles, everything.
What's outside this blanket?
More blankets, that's the point.
Blanket's everything.
Exactly. This is everything, okay? Let's just say that this is me, right? And I'm, 60-odd years old, and I'm wearing a gray suit, blah, blah, blah. And let's say over here, this is you, and you're 21, you've got dark hair, etc. And over here, this is Vivian, my wife and colleague. And then over here, this is the Eiffel Tower, right? It's Paris. And this is a war. And this is a museum. And this is a disease. And this is an orgasm. And this is a hamburger.
Everything is the same, even if it's different.
Exactly. But our everyday mind forgets this. We think everything is separate, limited. I'm over here, you're over there, which is true. But it's not the whole truth, because we're all connected. Because we are connected.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, now, we need to learn how to see the blanket truth all the time, right in the everyday stuff. And that's what this is for.
Why?
Why what?
Why do I need to learn how to see the blanket thing all the time in the everyday stuff?
Well, you wouldn't want to miss out on the big picture, would you?
Uh-uh.
That's partly why you're here, right? And this is it. I'm talking about it right now. I mean, it'll take a while for you to get it, you know? But it'll help you.
How?
When you get the blanket thing, you can relax because everything you could ever want or be, you already have and are.
Sure. I think this is a pretty good illustration to how we could all be connected. So we need to think with the blanket truth all of the time. This is what the course is here to help us do. Its goal is to help us out of the separate mentality and then back into the wholeness mentality. And to do this, we must accept the atonement at that place of the inner altar, where we project ourselves from and where we accept the atonement from. At the center of this altar, no fear can exist because pure light or pure knowing has no darkness for fear to hide in. When we veer from the center of it toward the projecting side of our experience, we begin to create the illusion of distance from our connection. We further this by feeding the idea of us as an individual, and eventually we lose sight of the altar, our connection to God. As a result, we become more susceptible to the fear and become taken over by the idea of separation. It's this way of thinking that we have to let go of to make this all work. We are to use the physical world to heal the fear-based mentality. We have to heal at the level of injury, which injury is only something we could possibly even experience within this fear-based mindset. So we have to center ourselves in all of the distractions of the fear-based world of fear, disease, death, and yet still try to find our peace and truth while feeling it all. Being in the separation mindset, but not of it. To see it and then to still be able to remember our truth by going within ourselves to the altar of God and release our inner knowing. And recognizing the lie that is the fear-based world. In that moment, we can watch it dissolve into nothing, which it actually is, and then watch that world of illumination come into focus and live from that place. This is the purpose of the world, to use the defense of the atonement to abolish the error from the place it was formed. The Course says, the acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time, This may appear to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision, but this is not so. This is not so because we have the freedom to choose how we come to the truth and when we come to the truth, but the atonement is inevitable. It is truth that we will seek, and it's truth that we will return to because we are from truth, and ultimately we are truth. We have to choose to take back our minds and follow our path of knowing back into the world of illumination of all knowing and truth. The Course compares it to the pain threshold and how variable that can be from person to person. It's the same thing with this. The choice is there for our choosing. We have the ability to miscreate. We have the ability to choose a separate mentality, but for some people that limit is high, and for others it's low. So it is just a matter of everyone experiencing and deciding that for themselves. But eventually, at some level, even on a small scale, everybody comes to that realization that there has to be a better way. That wraps up this episode. The thoughts I share in each podcast are my best interpretation of what resonated as truth for me. I love sharing them with you, but my intention is to evoke your own thoughts that will make rise within your awareness your own truth. Thank you for being a part of my journey and for allowing me to be a part of yours. With your coffee still warm and your notes fresh, take some time to go inward. Align yourself daily with your truth and take it with you into every experience. Until next time, keep shining.